They sold my ranch for just $25,000, and I had no idea it was even up for sale. Sounds unbelievable, right? Let me explain how you can lose your entire life's work while doing something as ordinary as mending a fence. It all started like any other day. I was at the tractor supply store, arms full of alfalfa, when a text from my neighbor stopped me cold. "Hey Cass, saw a sold sign on your gate. Thought you weren't selling." I froze in place, reading it over and over, hoping I'd misunderstood. My stomach hit the floor. I dropped the feed right there in the aisle and sprinted out of the store. "Sorry again, Earl, for almost wrecking your cart," and tore down the gravel road back home. And there it was, a giant padlock on the front gate my father carved by hand. A garish sold sign hung from the post like it was mocking me. I stood there, wild-eyed and yelling at no one. The chain rattled uselessly in my hands. My ranch, my home, was locked up. A real estate sign flapped nearby, bearing the name of some out-of-town company I'd never heard of. I called the county clerk right away, trying not to let the panic creep into my voice. "There's a mistake," I told her. "I'm not even part of an HOA." She didn't sound the least bit surprised. Calmly, she said there had been a foreclosure, something about unpaid liens, and that the sale had gone through the previous Friday. All above board, all legal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could any of this be legal? My grandparents had left me this land. I've spent my whole life taking care of it. But I guess when you're quiet and mind your business, you get pushed aside. Especially when someone like Cynthia Brewer gets involved. And speak of the devil. Cynthia rolled up right then, sunglasses on, strutting like she owned the place. Didn't even greet me, just took out her phone, snapped a picture of me standing there like a fool, and said, "You're trespassing now, sweetie. New owners take possession Monday." If I hadn't been gripping the fence, I think my knees would have buckled. Let me back up. My name's Emily Walker. I'm 33. I inherited Walker Ranch after my grandparents passed. I'd never had legal trouble in my life. Never even gotten a parking ticket. I kept to myself, raised goats, repaired fences, and kept my head down. The folks across the creek? New money, new builds, and apparently a new homeowners association that seemed to pop up overnight, right around the time Cynthia moved in. I didn't give it much thought. Our family land predated that subdivision by decades, and our estate lawyer had always told us the HOA had no jurisdiction over us. I believed him until the letters started. The first was a friendly reminder to mow the grass. Fine, no problem. Then came a notice about livestock being visible from the road on a ranch. I laughed it off. Then Cynthia showed up at my door wearing heels, pearls, and a polished smile that never reached her eyes. iPad in hand, she said, "We've noticed some violations. You're on our registry." I told her my attorney said we weren't. She just shrugged and said, "Sometimes deeds get misplaced, but you're here now." I should have realized then that she wasn't going away. I tossed her handbook into the burn barrel and forgot about it. What I didn't know was that the envelopes I kept ignoring, stacking up in the junk drawer, weren't just annoying letters. They were certified legal documents. Warnings, notices, court summons. And I never opened them, never showed up to a single hearing. Until one day, there it was, an eviction notice in my mailbox. A sheriff on my porch, telling me I had 3 days to leave the only place I'd ever called home. Later that day, I sat on my neighbor Ben's porch, numb, holding a cold drink in my hand while everything I'd ever known slipped out from under me. Sweet tea in hand, I stared at that notice like maybe if I just looked hard enough, it would vanish or rewrite itself. My neighbor Ben, a Vietnam vet with more stories than time, leaned on the fence and gave me a look. "You better check your granddad's deed," he said. "That Cynthia woman was snooping around last week asking about property lines. Something smells off." And it clicked. Maybe the answer wasn't in the fight, but in the foundation, literally. I spent that whole night tearing through drawers, tins, even the crawl space. Then I remembered what my granddad always said. If it matters, it's behind the stove. Sure enough, behind that old rusted range was a metal box. Inside it, a deed from 1964, notarized and crystal clear, Walker Ranch was exempt from any homeowners association now or ever. I sat down hard on the floor, clutching that paper, laughing and crying like a fool while my dog Daisy licked my face. She always knew when something big was about to happen. But Cynthia wasn't finished. She showed up the very next day with a couple of private security goons and a clipboard like she was some land baroness. I called every lawyer in town, but no one would take the case without charging enough to buy the ranch twice over, until I met Jacob. Fresh out of law school, sharp-eyed, full of energy. He looked over the deed and immediately saw the fraud. "They faked your presence at the meeting where they said you joined the HOA," he told me. "That's illegal. We've got a case." We filed for an emergency injunction. The judge hit pause on everything while we waited for the hearing. I thought I could finally breathe. I was wrong. The next week I was served again. Cynthia now claiming defamation, property interference, even emotional distress. As absurd as it sounded, it was real. And the harassment didn't stop. My mailbox was suddenly blocked off. My water line mysteriously got dug up. Someone even broke into my shed and set the goats loose. I thought about giving up. I really did. But then Carol, widow from across the street, kinda spring, knocked on my door with a casserole in one hand and a survey map in the other. "Thought you might need this," she said. That map proved what I knew. My land never belonged to the HOA. And that was the spark. Soon others joined in. Old neighbors started dropping off their own dusty maps, HOA bylaws, even resignation letters. Turns out Cynthia had been bullying the board, and people were done being quiet. Even Mark, who used to sit on the board, gave me a call. "I quit the day she started threatening folks," he told me. The day in court finally came. Cynthia walked in like a one-woman parade, draped in a bold red suit, backed by a trio of lawyers. But her swagger started to crack the second Jacob laid out our case. He presented the original deed, survey maps, signatures that didn't match, and the final nail, an email from the county clerk's office. It confirmed that Cynthia and the title officer had altered boundary lines and planned to flip the ranch to a developer for a massive payout. The courtroom fell still. Neighbor after neighbor stood up to speak. Even Ben straightened his back and said, "This land's been in her family since she was knee-high. That's a fact." When the judge ruled in our favor, nullifying the sale, voiding the lien, and restoring the ranch, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow, like I'd been holding my breath for months. Cynthia didn't say a word as she was led out in handcuffs. Her lips pressed so tight they nearly vanished. A few weeks later, the supposed buyer tried to threaten a lawsuit over the deal falling through. My lawyer just chuckled, handed them the ruling, and told them to get in line. And just like that, it was over. Or at least the legal part was. The news spread. Reporters came knocking. Strangers wrote to say they'd lived their own version of this story. Pies landed on my porch like offerings. But what struck me most was that this whole mess wasn't just about a ranch. It was about standing firm against people who believe money and influence give them the right to rewrite reality. They tried to flatten my family's history for a tennis court and a pool. But they didn't count on an old deed, a rusty stove, a whole lot of grit, and a town finally saying, "Enough!" Now the wildflowers are blooming where the barn once stood. Daisy naps in the sun. And the sign is back on the front gate. Walker Ranch, 1964. Still standing. But let me be honest, it never truly ends. There's always another Cynthia waiting in the wings. Another company with glossy brochures and bad intentions. So let me ask you, what would you have done in my boots? Did the system really work? Or was I just lucky this time? If you've ever been pushed around by a power-hungry HOA or a greedy developer, share your story. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and stick around. Because this fight is far from over.